And then I can go ahead and admit them.
Great, we are recording.
Awesome. Thanks, Margot. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. We are just gonna let a couple more folks go ahead and trickle on in, but we are excited that you're here with us. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started, and then if I can ask Pauline if you can go ahead and let some folks come in from the waiting room, that would be great. So hi, everybody. Welcome to the Student Success Series session that we have going on today. My name is Maria Rodriguez. I go by Ria. Pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Student Success Coordinator with the Chancellor's Associate Scholars Program. We're really excited for today's session, as we will have Bespoke Partners share some tips to successfully negotiate, your first salary offer, as well as, learn about what other benefits are negotiable, right? I think for many of us who are thinking about really how do we engage in that practice? What does that look like? We'll definitely be able to get some nuggets of knowledge, as I like to say, to learn a little bit more about negotiations as well. So I did want to take time to welcome and introduce our two presenters for today. So our first presenter is Maria Scharper, who is the Vice President of Bespoke Partners based out of Philadelphia, California. So just a little bit about Maria. Yep, and I saw you waving your hand. So Maria is focused on building the executive teams and boards for private equity-backed software and technology companies. Prior to joining Bespoke, Maria spent 6.5 years at LLR Partners, growing the executive teams and boards for over 45, wow, that's a lot, 45 portfolio companies across education, financial tech, healthcare IT, security, and software industries. So outside of work, Maria can be found passionately cheering for all Philadelphia sports teams year-round or at the gym training and teaching a variety of exercise classes. Ooh, we'll definitely have to tap into that. Maria graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology and a minor in biology from Westchester University of Pennsylvania. And then I'll also go ahead and introduce Liz. Liz, if you want to go ahead and wave, hello. So Liz is our principal at Bespoke Partners based out of Austin, Texas. So Liz Moses joined Bespoke Partners as a principal in March of 2020, based in the Austin office. Prior to joining Bespoke, Liz was a team leader on the professional services firm segment at Gerson Lehrman Group. In this role, she led a team of 5 that supported management consulting firms in their PE due diligence work. She also spent 2 years at GLG, directly supporting most middle market private equity firms, as well as 7 major venture capital firms. Before moving to Austin, Liz worked in Crystal City, Virginia, as an event manager for Marriott. Liz graduated summa cum laude from the George Washington University, where she received a bachelor's of business administration, concentrating on international business and marketing. During her time at GW, Liz was a founder of the Lemon Day DC organization and spent time abroad in Israel and Ghana. Oh, that's pretty neat. So I just wanted to share a little bit in terms of what you can expect for today's session with our 2 panelists. So this will be a Q&A where we have questions already pre-formulated that we will be asking both Maria and Liz. But I also did want to mention to you, if there are any questions, that pop up throughout the session, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We will definitely go ahead and ask our presenters. We will also be spending the last 20 minutes in these 2 breakout sessions where we have an opportunity to ask a little bit more in-depth questions, as well as additional questions that we have to continue and get the conversation going. So we highly encourage participation if you are curious and just kind of want to poke their brains. But why don't we go ahead and get started, and I'll facilitate the first question. I also just wanted to mention that we are recording the session, just this piece, so we can share this knowledge with some other folks. But to go ahead and start us off, and either both Liz and Maria can go ahead and answer, or both, is the first question is, so what can I do to prepare for a negotiation?
Maria, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
Go ahead, Liz. I'll let you take this one.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks everyone for having us. We're super excited to be here. So before we jump in, just wanted to take one quick step back and kind of talk through what we typically see an offer process looking like. So when you get your job, sort of what you may see, and then sort of how you may go about negotiating from there. So part of that preparation process is really understanding what you're looking at. So typically when you've gone through an interview process, a company is going to make you an offer. They'll give you a call over the phone and they'll tell you, you've got the job. They'll give you really high level. We're really excited to bring you on. This is, what the salary is going to look like. And I would say, at that point, just listen to what they're saying, say thank you. And usually, 99% of the time, they will follow up with a more detailed offer letter. And at that point, that's when you sort of do some research, diligence on your end, and sort of formulate what your plan would look like in terms of a negotiation or counteroffer. So there's 2 components to any sort of offer. The first is going to be what your base salary is going to be. And then in several opportunities, you may see bonus potential as well, especially if you're thinking about going into a career in sales. You're going to want to look at both components and understand what your base is going to be, which is the paycheck that you'll receive every week, and then what you may receive on top of that from bonuses. As you think about negotiating, the whole package is important. If you're going into a role where there is sales and there's a lot of bonus to it, I would ask the question of, is this going to be a capped bonus, or are you going to have unlimited earning potential? So if you knock it out of the park and you do a great job at everything, you have the opportunity to have uncapped earning potential. So take all of those factors into account. And then we don't need to go into too much detail here, but the other pieces that I would look at are the benefits. So in several cases, you'll receive healthcare as a part of the offer that you're receiving. And depending on what healthcare is offered to you, that could be pretty significant. At Bespoke, for example, the base health insurance package is fully covered for Bespoke employees. So that saves us, probably thousands of dollars a year. So as you're looking at, your post-college budget, what you need to spend, there is healthcare that can be huge savings depending on what the company offers. The other piece that's really important is the 401k. So whenever you get a job, you'll start planning for retirement. You'll open a 401k account through your company. They will match a certain percentage of whatever you put in to that account. So typically we'll see, a 2 or 3% match, which is great. When I got my first job out of college, I worked at Marriott and they gave a 6% match, which my dad was super excited about. So another thing to kind of think about as you look at the whole package. So that would be the first step, take a look at the offer, look at what they've sent you in writing. And then from there, we really encourage doing some market research and really understanding, is this, equal to what peers of mine would be getting in other companies? There's a couple of tools that you can use to do that. Maria, I don't know if there's anything you want to touch on there.
Yeah, I think that certainly asking around any peers that are already in that industry, in that position, that's always a good starting point. And then also Glassdoor, their salary.com, some of the tools do have some free queries, so you can use them for free. And then your alumni or your career center might have access to like PayScale or some of the other tools that you might need a subscription for. So I would just leverage all the resources that you can, and walk into it knowing kind of where you should start and to negotiate up from there. And so I think that our general rule of thumb is that you should always negotiate an offer. And I think most companies expect that. And so we're talking about negotiating like the base salary or potentially the bonus. And so there's usually some flexibility and wiggle room in those two components. The other areas, and Liz might have touched on this, is sign-on bonus. If they're not at the market, can they offer you a sign-on bonus? Can there be a retention bonus if you stay through a certain amount of time? So those are typically areas where you can negotiate. The benefits like healthcare, medical, dental, vision, 401k, those are typically non-negotiable. Those are set. And sometimes companies have different tiers. So as Liz alluded to, the one tier at Bespoke is fully covered. If you opt for a better, bigger, different plan, then it would require that you pay into that at some level. And that should be covered in the offer letter or the benefits overview that they would give you. So definitely want to go in having a sense of what market's paying for your experience, your geography, kind of what you bring to the table, if you have any certifications, if you specialize in anything, if you did any relevant internships. It's always good to point those out, that you're leveraging that experience that can potentially increase your base or bonus potential.
Yeah, and I see there's a question in here about stock in the company as an incentive. That is a really great incentive. If you get stock in the company, I would be excited about that. 9 times out of 10, they're going to give you a very small percentage of stock options, which is, something that you can access at any time. It's invested in the stock market, and, tracking the stock market is a whole other project. But the good news is you have the ability to remove that from the stock market at any time. So that's essentially money that you'd have access to in a liquid form, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Maria. And thanks, Sarah, for dropping that in the chat for us. So the second question that we have is just wondering if there are maybe any rules or practices for negotiating a job offer.
Yeah, so I would say there aren't any concrete rules, but there are some things that I would say if you don't adhere to, it's not a great look. This is a company that you're going to be starting your career at, and you want to build a strong relationship with them and a level of trust with them from the start. So my 2 kind of rules of thumb would be, if you are negotiating an offer, I would usually allow for sort of 2 back and forths. So they present you with a written offer, you reach out to them to counter offer, they come back to you with an updated package, and you get one more time to counter offer and then see what they come back with. And then at that point, I probably wouldn't press it, a 3rd or 4th time. That may that may not set the best impression when you're starting at a new company. The other thing I would say is, in a lot of cases, companies are going to be pretty set in their ways, and they may extend certain benefits to you or make certain accommodations for you to really bring you on because they're very excited about you. So if they do go back and forth, 2 to 3 times, and you finally land on a package, I think walking away at the end doesn't leave a great taste in companies' mouths as you think about, longer term reputation. So, keep in mind, if you are going to go back and counter offer a second time, that, you want to think really critically about moving forward with that offer, as long as it's within reason for what you're looking for. And a couple other logistics pieces I would just add. So you are going back to sort of the process. So you're presented with a written offer. You review all of the components of the package that you're given. I would then follow up over email and ask to set up time to talk with the hiring manager and have that counteroffer conversation over the phone as opposed to on email. I think that really sets, expectations up front. It gives you a chance to make sure that there isn't, anything lost in translation with your tone or what you're looking for. That way you can really hear from them, how they're thinking about your counteroffer, and you can continue to reiterate how excited you are about the opportunity. There's just, some questions that you may have and things you want to address.
I think it's really important to be prepared for those conversations. So the more resources you can leverage and the more prepared you can be, this more seamless they'll go. It's still nerve-wracking, right? Talking about potentially joining an organization, there's all these emotions going on. So the more that you can like script it out and really rehearse it. I know I do that. I do that with when I'm presenting candidates to clients and clients to candidates. So it's just kind of, the rule of three, like write it down, rewrite it, say it again, like be confident in your presentation of like, hi, I have this much experience. I'm looking for this, or the market is paying this. And I saw the question that says, entry-level jobs. There's still room to negotiate for entry level. They're hiring people at entry level with no experience, right? But you still want to be paid market, right? You don't want to come in behind other people that joined with just as much or just as little experience as you. And so still research the market for that job or where you are. Different companies pay slightly differently, but that's why it's really important to look at the total package. So again, a job paying you 10 grand less, but covering all of your healthcare, you're actually making more than, that 10 grand, because you pay more in healthcare than not. And so it's just kind of having someone that can walk you through all those components, because there's also other benefits like pet insurance. So if that's important to you, maybe you pick the company that, has that as a potential, right? And so it's making sure that kind of what we call total rewards. It's not just the cash compensation, it's the all of those benefits and perks that come with it.
Yes, I'm seeing a question about multiple offers. Yes, I would definitely use multiple offers as a bargaining chip. Absolutely. And I'll just say I've negotiated every job that I've been in, even at entry level, my first role out of college and then my second role shortly after. Basically I looked at what I was getting paid and what I thought I should be getting paid based on, my peer set. So what I would encourage all of you is talk to each other about what you're seeing and what you're hearing and what companies are offering you. The best resource that you can use is your peer set. I rely on my friends all the time to tell me what they're making and, if that's market. I think there's a level of transparency that our parents' generation could stand to learn from with us being more open and honest about what we're making. So, Candy, for example, is a graduate of this program. She now works at Bespoke. I'm sure she'd be happy to fill you in on, what she's heard and what people that graduated in her year made. Use your network to really get a sense as well of what's in market, and then, don't be afraid to ask for that.
Right. So would you recommend that in the email where you request to set up time to chat over the phone, you explicitly mentioned that you wish to discuss the potential of salary negotiation? Yeah, I would just generally say, in the email subject of, discuss offer or offer discussion. Because again, you want to give them, you don't want to set the wrong tone. So it's offer discussion, you're still discussing the offer. And you can draw attention to what you want to discuss when you're on the phone. Again, if you are negotiating or discussing this with, like what Liz says, kind of like the older generation, they might be a little bit put off. But what we've been seeing is a lot of people negotiate, and as long as you do it in a practical, transparent manner, that's what is really important. And you have that sense of professionalism. And, at the end of the day, like if it's not going to work out for you or for the company, it's okay, right? There's other companies, there's other jobs. And if this is kind of like the turning point for them, that might not have been a company that you wanted to work for anyways. So.
Yeah, and I'm seeing question on large companies versus small companies. So I definitely experienced this firsthand. I worked for Marriott right out of college. They did not agree to negotiate with me at all. I pushed, I tried, they said no, I said okay. Same thing with GLG, they have pretty specific comp bands. And so when I joined, again, I tried to negotiate. They didn't really give me much flexibility there, but they did walk me through the benefits. And that's sort of where I became comfortable with accepting the job. I think at a startup, you probably have more leverage because a large company like Marriott, for example, is going to have very specific ranges for their entry level positions, and they probably won't be super flexible on it. But, a company that is even a couple hundred employees, they don't have such specific parameters. And so your best chance of getting a favorable salary negotiation would be, a small to mid-sized company. Now, if it's a startup and they don't have the resources to give you additional salary, that would be where I would see if they can give you a sign-on bonus or a retention bonus for staying for a year or 2 years. They also may give you equity in the company, which could be really cool. If the company does well, then you would receive some payment down the road for contributing to the success of that company. So just, again, I think being transparent and asking for what you want, and then seeing, how we can work together to achieve that.
We always recommend negotiating directly with the hiring manager, what we call the stakeholder or the decision maker. Typically HR or the recruiter, they don't have as much visibility or insight into the actual budget. And so, there's things that, don't get necessarily relayed to those in that department. And so like the hiring manager has their own budget and can look and say like, we have this much flexibility or wiggle room. And so certainly, they have more of that knowledge and will be the ones that were actually making that decision. So we recommend going right to the key decision maker, the hiring manager. It's fine if you involve HR or the recruiter. You can let them know that you are, negotiating. That's fine. But just given where they are in the organization, they probably don't have that decision making. They should be advocating for you, certainly. So you can ask them to help you with like what's, like the range, or, if they haven't disclosed that before. And so definitely kind of gathering all the information you can from them is helpful.
So I'm seeing your question on public companies and the 25th percentile versus median pay. So I think that working on a public company, if they gave you stock and the salary is a little bit less, that is still a fairly competitive package. You look at the salary alone and it's lower, yes, may seem not as exciting, but you're getting stock in the company, and based on how the company performs, that number can grow. Whereas if you are just getting paid a fixed salary amount, you're going to get paid that amount no matter what you do. So there is something to be said about, working for a public company and getting that stock. And a question on cost of living without stock. So, if you've already accepted the job, I wouldn't say there's a ton of negotiation, but I would go back to them and ask what their process is for getting stock in the company, and say, is there a path to getting stock? And they may be flexible with you, and they may say, yeah, if you work here for 3 months, you're eligible for stock options. So I would just inquire. And sorry, to the question on cost of living, if you do work for a company that's in a different state, and this is obviously less of an issue now with COVID, but say, like, for example, at GLG, they offer a relocation bonus for making the move and covering your travel expenses and buying new furniture. So that's something to take into account. The other piece would be the company itself should have done a market map on what the cost of living in the city that they're in is. And if they have offices in several cities, they usually will adjust the salary bands to account for that. So, GLG has offices in New York and Austin, and obviously the New York office had slightly higher compensation bands for a reason. So you can ask, you can say, have you done any market research on cost of living? How does this compare to other companies in the New York City area, for example? I think it's okay to ask that to an HR manager or recruiter.
Thank you. These are awesome questions. So a question that I have is, what factors should I consider for justifying my counter offer?
So are you saying they came at you with, a salary of nice round numbers, because I'm not great at math, like $50,000, and you countered at 60,000, and then they came back and said, we don't have any more, or is that what you're, because like I think it's just like being prepared of like, hey, like great, thanks for the offer, really excited. In my research for this role and for this job, it's actually paying this in the market. And so like that's kind of like that setup discussion of being prepared with the data of, I know people that are making this, the same role, different company, different location. So it's just being prepared. So again, it's not like you have to say like, well, I have, or I was, it's like, I've done my research. The market is this, right? It's just trying to take the emotion out of it. Like just be prepared about, I've done research. I've looked at Glassdoor, I've looked at LinkedIn, I've networked with my peers that are in this field. Here's where the average salary is falling, and I was looking to be in that range. So it's really just, they're probably expecting you to negotiate. And so as long as you can kind of have that discussion in a, very communicative order and be pleasant about it, it's usually a very healthy discussion.
Yeah, and I would add, if you have done internships in the space, or if you have any certifications, if you're going into, engineering roles, for example, but you have like a product management certification, or if you're going into marketing, but you have an SEO search optimization certification, those are things you can share to justify your experience. But you shouldn't necessarily have to justify it. I think I would always try to negotiate, and I would always try to share market data. But the reality is, if it's not meeting your expectations and you're hoping to get something else to cover your cost of living, or what you wanted to make coming out of college, it doesn't hurt to try. They may say no, but I would say, especially in this job climate, it's not uncommon to negotiate, and it's certainly not unwarranted.
Mm-hmm. So remote hybrid work requests, I think that that's something that should be addressed in the beginning, right? If that's something that is very important to you, where you either want a hybrid role with the option of going into the office, or you want a completely remote role, like that should be something that you're actively targeting in your job search, right? Like there's all these job sites, and I'm sure they now have filters where you can filter remote only, or, if it doesn't necessarily speak to the hybrid situation, definitely ask that in the first couple of interviews, and make sure that they're aware that that is your desire. Like, I'm looking for a flexible work environment where I can be in the office, but I can also work from home. And as long as you are communicating that expectation throughout the process, there won't be any surprises at the end. But just make sure that you get the answers that that you want, right? And you feel good about them. Like, you don't want the recruiter like, oh yeah, it's flexible. Like, you want them to say, like, we have other employees that are on a flexible schedule. That is something you will work out with your manager, right? And then when you talk to the hiring manager, what employees of yours are hybrid? What does that look like? What can I expect? So it's just, again, getting real clear about the expectations and communicating that.
I love that you have a PhD. What's your PhD in? Okay, awesome.
Unfortunately, I don't agree that you have low experience. You have a ton of experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think that perception is definitely old school, right? And I hope that you aren't encountering that. You certainly have a ton of education and knowledge to leverage, and so you need to have the confidence walking into it with that of like, I have seen a lot in my academics, and also here's the other things I do outside of just school, right? And so I think it's bringing your whole person to the job and leveraging all of your experience. And so apply for roles that say you need 3 years, right? In this job market, companies are being flexible about requirements. And so, the rule of thumb is like, I think everyone's seen that stat where men apply to roles that they're like 60% qualified for, and women only apply to roles that they're 100% qualified for. So I think it's like, if you do the research and it's a company you want to work for and you can bring value to them, if you can explain that value to them, they're willing to listen. And so I would apply to all the jobs that seem interesting to you for a company that you want to work for, right? I think it's very important to align your job search with companies that have the same mission, vision, values as you, or else it's not going to be the right situation for you in long run.
Yeah, and I don't know what your long-term career goals are, but something in like consulting or market research, like they will pay more for someone who has a PhD. So I think, depending on what you want to do, of course, look at jobs like that where they're going to recognize that having a graduate degree and a PhD is additive. Chris, on your question, I would be very careful about bonus because yes, the bonus may make the salary at market or above what you're seeing from someone who's, just got a base component, for example. So I usually ask the question of what metrics am I being measured on? What am I being graded on to achieve that bonus? And if it's something that is really challenging and the chances of you receiving that full bonus are really slim, I probably would not consider that to be an attractive offer, and I would push them on giving you more in the bonus in the base salary category. But if it's like, yeah, we've seen sales reps achieve this, 60% of the time or 70% of the time, where it's not a walk in the park, but it is something that's attainable, that would be something that I would look at and be like, okay, that's attractive.
Great. And another question, which I know you all alluded to it a bit, but what if we're told that there is no negotiation room because they're offering the highest salary that they can extend? Are there maybe any other benefits that we haven't necessarily talked about already, or that we can look to negotiate?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I think we said sign-on bonuses, definitely. And so if you're looking at some of these bigger companies, they have bands for their jobs. Where like you come in at like band 8 and it's one salary. And then when you get promoted to the band 7, you get this type of salary increase, right? So some big companies are structured like that, and it's that salary across the board until you get a promotion. So you can ask for sign-on bonuses. You can ask for discretionary bonuses. So at 6 months, if you are in a metrics driven role and you are showing your value and you're hitting your numbers, can you get a bonus at that point? And so it just depends on the kind of industry and the function that you're in. You can also take on extra projects, and at year end say, I did my job, but I also did all of these extra stretch projects. Can I get a spot bonus or a one-time bonus for that? And so those are typically where we see negotiation with. But again, I think it's retention, sign-on bonuses. Those are, or if you're relocating, when you cover that, that's typically where you have the most room for negotiation.
Great. And I believe we had another question in the chat in terms of how can we see the component-based pay increase over years with the company?
Yeah, so that should be something that is included as part of your onboarding. It may be at a very high level, so you may not see the specifics, but for example, when I took this job to be a principal at Bespoke, they said, this is what your salary and earning potential is in a P1 role. And then, the next step is get promoted to P2. The next step is get promoted to P3. Here's what your earning potential will look like, both from a base perspective and from any sort of bonuses that you'll earn. Some companies may not have the ability to share all of that with you. So, say you're coming in as a research analyst and you want to see what you could make as a research analyst just for example, they may not share that with you. But the question to ask would be then, what does the career path look like? What promotion track could I be on if I take this role? How does that affect, my longer term earning potential? I think the key there is to focus on your career potential within the company. Something that companies love to see is an employee that's going to stay, because it's difficult for them to keep training new employees. So if you're already talking about, what does my path look like? How can I excel at your company? That's going to be, really attractive to a company and make them want to work with you more.
Thanks. And the last question that I have, I think really is geared towards just that process in the conversation, right? Of what should I, be prepared to answer while negotiating, or maybe if there's tips on language that we can use as we engage.
Yeah, I can just give an example from my experience. So, my first roll out of college, I got the call. They told me how much it was going to be. I said, great, let me think about it. I thought about it for 2 days. I talked to my dad. He said, ask for more. So I called them back and I was like, I'm super excited about the opportunity. I was really hoping for my salary to be more in the, X to Y range. Is there any flexibility in terms of, entry level salary? And they basically said, no, there's no flexibility. And I wish I'd had this training, because I at that point probably would have said, okay, if there's any potential for sign-on bonuses or retention bonuses, I'd love to be considered for that. I've very rarely seen them come back with any, why do you think you deserve this? Or can you tell me why you'd be asking for that? But coming back to what we'd said earlier, I think the talk track is, I've done some market research. This is what I'm seeing for roles of, this size in this city, for a company of this size. I'd really like to be within the market range.
Thanks, Liz. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go into 2 small breakout rooms where we're going to have an opportunity to be able to just kind of poke their brains a little more. So we have breakout room 1, which will be with Maria. And then we have breakout room 2, which will be with Liz. And then both Pauline and myself will be also kind of in there helping to facilitate just some questions. But we really just want to provide this opportunity for y'all to just be able to ask those questions. So we will be coming back at 12:55, and then I'll just share some closing remarks, as well as where you could find a recording of this video. And then we'll close off for today. So I believe we have the breakout rooms open.